1. This happened about 3 years ago, right at the height of Pokemon Go's popularity. I played it regularly with my fiancée Luke. We decided to get clever, and instead of walking to make our eggs grow or whatever, I would just drive around the residential streets slowly, about 15 miles per hour. We always drove the same path, and we did this several times. At the time, we lived in a very small, one-traffic light town. The town was primarily low-income families. We usually played Pokemon at about 10 to 11 p.m., as did several other locals. Without other entertainment, it was a fairly popular game around town. This particular night, I'm driving the normal path with Luke. We're catching sick Pokemon left and right, and hatching eggs like crazy. We paused in the water department's parking lot to catch our 217th Ekans. We drive for about 10 more minutes and park next to an empty lot. Across the street is a normal residential landscape with houses and whatnot. I'm catching my first Pikachu, stoked AF, and some guy drives by in a beat-up silver SUV. He slows down and asks me if I'm okay. I smiled and flashed my phone screen and told him we were playing Pokemon. He said something like, "Okay, have a good one." But he seemed weird, and I know. But I was about to. So we leave and make our first loop around the neighborhood, pausing as we go to collect various Pokemon. About 15 minutes later, we are back by the empty lot because there's another Pokemon. Suddenly, the house across the street starts pointing beams of light at me. Very small and bright. It was weird. So Luke and I noped out of there. As soon as we did, the beat-up silver SUV is behind me. I didn't even see where he came from. I turn onto the main road to head home. I didn't even realize anything was wrong at first. He pulls up next to me and I can only see a male driving and a female passenger. The driver is shining a blinding light at me through his window as we drive. At this point, I'm simply pissed. I keep asking Luke what this guy's problem is. I'm telling him to tell the guy to fuck off, all the while I'm becoming petrified. I'm a confident person, but I'm not a confident driver, and I had no idea why these people were messing with us. But I do know that it's the same guy that asked if I was okay earlier. I don't want to drive home because I don't want to lead these people to my house, but I had no idea what to do. I decided to drive to the police station, but there was no one there. Parking lot empty, lights off. We have 2 police officers, so they both must have been out patrolling. I was shook. I was raised in a city, so tiny town living and no police at the police station was foreign to me. I had no clue what to do, so I drove to the little hospital and managed to lose them. My fiancé and I changed seats without speaking. We sat there for 15 seconds and pulled out. He's behind us again, and he's aggressive. I call 911 at this point and begin crying to dispatch, telling them that a crazy guy is following us. At this point, Luke is flying through the town at random. He's running red lights, speeding 70 plus in residential areas, tearing through people's lawns. This was seriously as insane as it sounds. Everywhere we went, he went too. Every time we sped up, he did too. We had no idea what he wanted, but we knew he wanted to hurt us. We could feel it. At one point, we were tearing through yards in my car, no fences, and the guy manages to box us in. I'm still on the phone with 911. We are stuck between his car and a copse of trees. Immediately upon stopping, the guy jumps out, as does his female passenger and 2 very large male passengers in the back seat. Luke immediately pulls out his gun, points it at them, and screams, "Get the fuck back, get the fuck back." They all bolt back to their vehicle and take off. I am absolutely shaking and sobbing at this point, talking to 911, and the lady finally asks me where I want the cops to meet me. I tell her the local gas station. We are there within 20 seconds, as are the cops. This town is seriously so little. I don't know how the cops didn't see us or intervene while we destroyed dozens of yards at midnight and drove extremely fast and recklessly. Seconds after we pull in, so does the SUV. The guy jumps out and begins to rush my car. Cops stop him. They talk to him for a while. We are just sitting in our car shaking. Older cop finally walks over to talk to us and says, "Sup, did one of you pull a gun on him tonight?" We were shocked. That is the only thing he asked us. We told him yes, explained everything that happened. The cops went and talked to him again, came back and basically said the guy thought we were casing his house, because he kept seeing our vehicle pass it. The cop told us we were lucky that he decided not to press charges because Luke pulled his gun. My car had decent damage from driving through trees and bushes and was scratched up. Pretty sure the guys were going to beat us, and the cops told us we were lucky. We were so scared and shaken up we didn't argue anything and left when they allowed us to. But not before they ran our info and made us feel like criminals, like we were childish and stupid for playing Pokemon. The cops openly laughed at us. We went home and stayed up literally all night long, taking turns peeking out our window. We were convinced they were going to drive around, find my car, and harass us. The next day, we had a high-tech security system installed. I have since seen the guy and girl several times. I worked at the school, and they had young children. I have never seen or interacted with them prior to this day or after. But I know they knew who I was, so I'm glad I don't live there anymore. I also never played Pokemon Go after that night. I should mention that I understand why the guy thought what he did, but I do not think his reaction was justifiable. 2. When I was a junior in high school, I was quite an odd kid. I liked having colorful hair, piercings, and all that kind of stuff. And the school I went to was near Atlanta, so there weren't many people like me. I tried to find friends that liked the same kind of music and other interests, and I could normally kind of brush off any weird energy that people put off. Ignore it. I just wanted friends. Anyway, I was in the gym one day hanging out with a group of weirdos, and there was a guy that I hadn't seen before. He was wearing a Guns N' Roses t-shirt, and jeans that were like a size too small. His name was Ernest. We immediately clicked with each other, in a platonic way, because we laughed at a lot of the same things. We started hanging out in the gym together every day, people watching and making fun of people playing basketball. It wasn't too long until he started making fun of my appearance and making me feel absolutely terrible about myself. I had acne super bad in high school, and he joked that I had meth skin. First strike. Me being me, though, I kept hanging out with him, and eventually it led to hanging out after school. He would invite me over to his house, and we only stayed in his room. He refused to let me meet his family. His parents didn't really speak English, but I still wanted to meet them. I always thought it was weird that Ernest didn't know Spanish, but his siblings did. And when he could speak words, it sounded Russian. He pretty much only played It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia on the TV, and rambled about superheroes, and would always come up with these strange scenarios, where he was an evil villain, and how much power he could have. Fast forward, I get a job at a pizza place. Ernest gets the same job at this pizza place, so inevitably we are always together. Always. He pretty much never let me out of his grasp. It got to a point where he took me to school every day in his PT Cruiser. I still get chills every time I see one of those damn shoe-shaped ass cars. We started skipping school a lot. I mean, we pretty much went to school about 2 or 3 times a week. This is where it starts to suck pretty bad. He started pressuring me to do sexual things with him. I don't really want to get into details because it's pretty disturbing, but he manipulated the situation in such a way that I felt like we were in a relationship because I thought that I needed him. He really convinced me that we were a couple, but I was so repulsed by him that I could never fully accept that. He started telling our other friends that he had sex with me and that we were in a relationship. I denied it all. To this day I deny it. I've lied to therapists, I've lied to my friends, but right now I'm admitting to all of that. At one point, he ended up living with me and my family in the same room as me. He had convinced my entire family that he was gay so he could live with me. He literally dressed up in pink and put a scarf around his neck and pranced around my aunt, trying to win her over with this fake personality. I was so used to living in chaos, this was barely a problem for me. During all of this, he was such a rude piece of shit to me. I remember asking him for a ride one day. Can't remember to where, and he said no, for no good reason. I started getting really angry because he couldn't actually give me a reason, he just kept smirking at me. He did this type of thing frequently. We were sitting in the living room and he silently got up and drove off somewhere, came back, walked to the living room doorway, stared at me for 15 seconds, and walked into my room. I hear a bunch of rustling, so I storm in, thinking he's up to something sketchy. He's gotten completely dressed into his sleep pants with his hand in his pocket, and he just wouldn't take his hand out of his pocket. At this point I'm scared. I forced my hand into his pocket and pulled out a knife. I don't remember how the night or days continued after that. Fast forward again. I'm at my best friend Kayla's birthday party and everyone is camping in the backyard. Ernest hated Kayla because she was a way out for me, in his perspective. She got in the way of us. I'm sweating typing this out because it's probably one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me. The sequence of events is a little blurry, but I remember it. I had made it clear to Ernest at this point in time that we were not a thing and that he needed to let go of that fantasy. I had a crush on this boy named John, and we slept in the same room together. Morning comes, and I hear Ernest outside, asking people if they knew where I was. Someone said she's in the tent with John. I was scared immediately. I knew something bad was about to happen. The tent rips open. I don't have a shirt on. He begins screaming as loud as he can, cussing all of us out and just pitching an absolute fit, and he storms off. He goes to his car and calls me and tells me to get to the car now. Everyone there was freaked out, and Kayla advised me not to go to the car, because she knew how scary Ernest was just as a person. I didn't want anyone to be uncomfortable, so I figured that if I went to the car, it would ease everyone just a bit that he wasn't there. I went. As soon as the car door closed, we sped off, fast, really fast. I look over at him wide-eyed, and he is scream-crying with absolutely no expression in his face. Tears streaming, but emotionless. He says, "You were supposed to love me," over and over and over again. He starts speeding faster and said, "If I can't love you, then no one else can." I'm actively having a straight panic attack in the passenger seat. I can't hear because my ears are ringing and I can't see a thing. Meanwhile, Kayla has already called my mom, and somehow my mom left the house fast enough to track us down in that PT Cruiser. He parks at a church, and my mom is watching us. Ernest had a box cutter at his side. I get a call from my mom. I can't really remember what she said, but I know it was something along the lines of "I'm gonna slit your fucking throat" to Ernest. He started coming to his senses, if you can even call it that, and drops me back off at Kayla's and tells me that he's going to kill himself after he drops me off. Kayla and I were frantically trying to call his parents about a possible imminent suicide. However, they could not speak English. He called the police on himself because he thought he was going to harm himself or someone else. He was gone for a couple of weeks, and when he came back, he was parked outside my school waiting for me to come out. He runs up to me. I noticed that he had on a plaid button shirt, and it was tucked into his pants, which was just extremely odd to me, and I knew immediately that this was a fake personality. He was speaking differently as well, proper almost. Like a few weeks had turned him into a saint. It wasn't long after that I admitted myself into a mental institution because I just kept breaking down. Everyone in the groups told me to get rid of him, and I had not realized how serious this was until I saw everyone's reactions to the stories. There are so many stories of this psycho, but I can't even type it all out. I did get rid of him. I find new friends, and without them, I don't know how this would have gone. I haven't seen or spoken to him in about 3 years. Let's not meet ever again. 3. This happened between the ages of 13 to 16. I'm 26 now, but I still remember it vividly. When I was in the 8th grade, my friend Jenny and I were messing around during PE, and our teacher was getting irritated that we weren't paying attention, or doing what we were supposed to do, so he separated us. Before we parted ways, I handed her my phone and told her to give me her number. She quickly put it in, and I put my phone back in my sweat pockets and went to the other side of the gym. I texted her, "Hey, it's me," and a picture of me making a face, and she replied a couple of minutes later. We were talking back and forth for a couple of minutes before I said something I thought was hilarious, and I looked up to watch her read my text and burst out laughing. That was when I got a response without Jenny ever looking at her phone. Who was I texting? I replied, "Who was I talking to?" and they never responded. After class ended, I walked up to Jenny and asked her what her number was. She told me her number, and the number I had in my phone was off by 1 digit. The person never texted me back, so I ultimately forgot about it. A couple of days later, I was standing outside of my school talking to my friends when I got a text from the number. "You look good in blue," it said. "Who is this?" I asked. "Jenny," they responded. It wasn't Jenny. I looked around, but amongst all the cars and kids, I couldn't even begin to imagine where the person who was texting me was. I was wearing a blue shirt that day, but I didn't really get creeped out by it because, being a 13-year-old teenager, I didn't realize the severity of how weird that was. So, for a couple of years, I would randomly get text messages from this person, who I found out was a man, telling me he loved me and telling me he was going to make me his one day and things like that. I never told my mom about it because, again, I didn't realize the severity of it. That was until something happened when I turned 16. One day after school my sophomore year, I was sitting on my couch watching TV when my phone chimed. It was a picture message from a number I didn't have saved in my phone. I opened it, and it was a picture of a male's private area. I yelled, "Ew!" and threw my phone. A couple seconds later my phone chimed again. I picked it up, and it was a picture of a big Hispanic man coming from the same number. I showed my mom's boyfriend at the time, and he called my mom to come home. When my mom got home, I showed her the pictures and told her everything. Of course, she was angry at me for not telling her years ago when this all started, but I just apologized, and she told me it wasn't my fault, and we were going to the police. So we get to the police station and file a report. The officer, who shall remain unnamed, in short did nothing. He ran the number and told us, "This number is from a town over, so it's technically out of our jurisdiction." My mom asked if we should go to the town over and file a report, and he said no, that he would call him. This is how the conversation went between the officer and the man. "Hello, this is Officer G. Ullable. Have you been sending pictures to a young girl?" "No habla inglés." "Oh, okay, sorry." That was it. That was the whole conversation. My mom was livid. She lost her mind on this officer. I don't even remember most of what she said, except for that it was very loud, there was lots of cussing, and the officer was scared. He looked at my mom and told her, "Look, he hasn't ever showed up in person, and he doesn't live in town. My suggestion is to just block his number." My mom, dissatisfied with this answer, grabbed me and we left. We were going to the next town over's police department. Yes, he was right. I hadn't ever seen him in person, but he had seen me in person. He knew things like where I was and what I was wearing, and had been texting me for years. On the way to the police department, he called. My mom pulled over and grabbed my phone. "Hello?" "Hello, where is she?" "This is her mother, you sick fuck." He started laughing and then told her, "She is mine. I'm going to take her away from you and make her my wife. You can't stop me." My mom started screaming that I will effing kill you, you coward. The whole time he just laughed at her while my mom yelled and started crying. After he hung up, my mom called the police again, and they told us there was nothing they could do and to just block him. Luckily, that was the last time I had ever heard from him. This was 10 years ago, and I still think about it all the time. I have a daughter who I worry about things like this happening to, or that man coming back one day and targeting her or something. Sorry I did not have a crazy climactic ending, but it's still something that makes me nervous even to this day. I have never seen him in person, but the fact that he has seen me and knew where I went to school, who knows if he is still out there or if he really did give up. All I know is I hope I never meet him. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 465. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. You know, that last story there, I have to say, that's one of the things that confuses and frustrates me, and I'm obviously not alone in that frustration, about American law enforcement, the idea of state lines and jurisdictions. In fact, that's how in many cases, serial killers in America, how many of them have managed to operate for as long as they did, and some which have even gotten away with it to this day because they cross state lines, and police departments don't communicate with each other, and it's an unfortunate, frustrating, and sad thing that just by default there isn't automatic communication and cooperation between departments. Of course, I don't think it's as bad now as it used to be, certainly back like the 70s, 80s, 90s, right about then. I think there's a bit more cooperation now, but it should be on a much bigger scale by default. Crime knows no jurisdiction. Criminals know no jurisdiction. They don't suddenly think, "Oh wait, no, I'm out of my territory. I should certainly stop breaking the law now." So why should the law enforcement officials be required to do the same? And that ends Crime Corner with Hellfreezer. Hope you all enjoyed. Okay, I think we'll head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.